Greg, let's talk about cross-platform measurement. An ad appears, the same ad appears on a linear network, on a website, on a Twitter feed. How do you link it all together? How can you best give credit to that advertiser?
That is probably the biggest challenge facing the industry right now. And it really starts not so much with measurement, it starts at the beginning. How do you sell it? How do you put it into a contract? How does an advertiser or an agency come to a network and say, this is where I want to put everything? How do you lay it out in a contract? How do you put it into the operation systems so that it gets counted correctly? And then how do you measure it? And then how do you invoice for it? The biggest challenge I think facing the industry is trying to take sort of old school linear ways of doing things like ad sales and applying to this new digital world, and it's a huge challenge, and it is definitely the biggest challenge facing the industry when it comes to metrics. Metrics in this world, no answers yet, and what they're doing is piecemealing it and then physically adding it up and saying here's the final invoice for the run of that advertiser. Everyone's talking about it and a lot of great ideas, but nothing has been confirmed of how this convergence actually works. And as new platforms keep coming up and we find more inventive ways to put advertising into this content, not just running a 30-second ad, but overlays and bumpers, and how do you account for all that? Huge challenge.
So what do you think the future is for the 30-second spot?
I still think it's live and robust, and it's going to be with us for quite a while. I think it's still the most effective way to get your message across. It's short enough that it keeps people's attention, but it's long enough that it's more impactful than just doing a billboard or a lower third. And I think sometimes those lower thirds can be very annoying and they can be distracting. Trying to watch something online can be tough when you get those lower thirds up all the time, or especially a lot of apps now, in between steps that you're doing, a full screen ad pops up and you got to keep closing it. I think that turns people off. I think the 30-second ad is going to be with us for quite some time. But I think advertisers and content providers have to be more selective and more creative with their ads. And I think that idea of one ad to cover a great wide audience, I think those days that's what's going to change. And I think it's going to become much more, not so much addressable, but much more targeted.
Okay, so I'm a programmer, and I go to you, and I give you a program, 30-minute program. What do you do with it?
Well, assuming it's going everywhere.
Yes.
Yes, which it should be going everywhere these days. We have to create a content package. It's not just about the video file. And a content package, very quickly, it's the video file, it's the metadata, which has all the description and all the schedule information and all the billing information, a lot of background IDs and things like that. And there's also the artwork that goes with it. As these user interfaces, UIs as we call them, become more sophisticated, you're seeing more and more artwork. It helps entice a consumer to watch the content. Anyway, you have to build a complete package. The challenge that you have is anytime any piece of that package varies for whatever reason, you have to create a new one. So if you have, say, a 10-episode series, you're not just creating 10 content packages that go out into the digital world. You're creating 10 for VOD. You're creating 10 for TV everywhere. You're creating 10 for what we call electronic sell-through, things like iTunes, Amazon, Netflix. If you're putting any of this on mobile, you're creating 10 different packages for that. And what happens then, it starts to multiply. Even on VOD, you might need 10 for SD, 10 for HD. If you have variances based on MVPDs, which most of them do vary, particularly in the TV everywhere world, because nobody's really following any set specifications. Even if the video file is the same, if your metadata is different, if content providers have different schedule patterns, they give MVPD A a 30-day window, but MVPD B a 60-day window, you've got to create different versions. In my last position, a 10-episode series could end up in 200 to 300 different content packages. They all have to be built and distributed and tracked and archived separately. So, we were at a place where one piece of content on average was creating anywhere from 5 to 6 different versions. Some of the high-end stuff, we're talking 20 different versions. Some of the more basic filler content, particularly marketing clips, you may only have 1 or 2, but it was averaging out to that level. It is a huge, huge challenge. And it's what's really prevented a lot of this content from being distributed across all these new platforms. Rights is one thing, but then there's the economies of scale that also fit in, because that's why dynamic ad insertion is so important, because if we as content providers can't generate some revenue on it, you kind of raise the question, well, why are we doing it? What's the point?